Cedar Fair is one of, if not the most successful amusement park chain in the world. With 125 different roller coasters, I thought it was time to rank all of the unique ones. I present to you my biggest video yet, every Cedar Fair roller coaster ranked. Just a quick disclaimer, this is a prediction, as I have not ridden every Cedar Fair coaster. Also, cloned rides like Woodstock Express will take up one placement instead of multiple. Because there are 112 different places on this list, this video will move a bit faster than my other ranking videos. With all of that said, let's rank every Cedar Fair roller coaster. 112, Cosmic Coaster at Valley Fair. Just a simple powered coaster that moves around in a helix with no forces. It's a kiddie coaster, so it places low. 111, Cosmic Coaster at Worlds of Fun. The only wacky worm in the chain is just a slow figure 8. Nothing special here, and it's also a kiddie coaster. 110, Great Pumpkin Coaster or Taxi Jam at various amusement parks. A small hill before diving down and a few turns. Again, just a forceless kiddie coaster. 109, Lucy's Krabby Cabbies. Another kiddie coaster makes the list, and this time, it's a bit bigger of a circle. 108, Wilderness Run at Cedar Point. Another kiddie coaster circle, but this time it has a hill and a secluded forest, so it's a bit better. 107, Wilderness Run at Carowinds. Similar to Great Pumpkin Coaster, but with a bit of a bigger hill and a tight helix. 106, Flight Deck at Canada's Wonderland. The first thrill coaster is a rough Vekoma SLC. The layout is okay, but its roughness brings it down all the way to 106. 105, Time Warp. Another Canada's Wonderland coaster makes the list, and it's in a very uncomfortable flying Zamperla that everyone hates. The trains are literally a prison cell. 104, Cedar Creek Mine Ride. This aero mine train is rough, uncomfortable, and overall just a slow and boring experience. The trains are really tight, and the transitions are some of the worst. 103, Kitty Hawk. This Carowinds family coaster is way too rough to enjoy. It's just a few boring turns and some shaky, headache-inducing transitions. 102, Timberline Twister. This kiddie coaster is surprisingly aggressive for being so small. Just a tight double helix, but each hill has a very sharp apex, and it also consists of tight turns. 101, Woodstock Express at California's Great America. This kiddie coaster is pretty large. A little drop and a few turns and hills make this a better kiddie coaster experience. 100, Silver Streak. A clone of Kitty Hawk, but a lot smoother overall and is more pleasant of a riding experience, which is the same as number 99, Flying Ace Aerial Chase. These two are interchangeable. 98, Woodstock Express at Cedar Point. This Vekoma is a small family coaster with a train at the front. It also has some tight turns to freshen up this kiddie coaster layout. 97, Woodstock Express / Ghoster Coaster clones at various parks. These small wooden coasters are surprisingly enjoyable. They have some nice hills and some tight turns to go along with them. 96, Carolina Cyclone. This aero looper is quite large, but it's way too rough to enjoy. The loops are intense, but the jerkiness of the corkscrews cause headaches and just ruin the already bad experience. 95, Hurler. Hurler at Carowinds is an okay coaster at first, but the second half of this woody takes a turn for the worst. It's one of the roughest coasters, and it's extremely forceless with its turns. 94, Flight of Fear. This launch coaster is located in Ohio and Virginia, and is just way too uncomfortable to enjoy. Its tight trains and slow middle cause this to rocket down the list, and it's relatively boring. 93, Psycho Mouse. Here comes the surge of wild mouse coasters in the chain. This Aero Mouse is the slowest of the bunch, causing it to place last. 92, Mad Mouse at Valley Fair. The same as the previous, just a bit faster and is in a nicer location next to High Roller. 91, Mad Mouse at Michigan's Adventure. The same thing as before, just a bit faster than the previous. 90, Thunder Run. This Canadian family coaster is okay at best. It's a powered coaster, which places it low because it's so forceless, but it's placed inside an artificial mountain. It's just a bit boring. 89, Wild Mouse at Dorney Park. This orange Wild Mouse is the first mock on the list. It's better than the arrows, but it's jerkier than the ones higher up. 88, Anaconda. This aero looper is okay at first, but the middle of the ride is too rough to enjoy, and it's very slow near the end. The setting over the water is nice though. 87, Ricochet. A clone of Wild Mouse, but it's overall a lot smoother of an experience, and its setting is a lot better. 86, Zack's Zoomer. A bit bigger than the previous Woodstock Woodies, which causes this to be more thrilling. Also, it's smoother and speedier, so it obviously places higher. 85. The Fly. This is one of the better Wild Mouse coasters, with its steep drop at the beginning instead of the end, and it also has a more original layout. 84. Coast Rider. Another yellow Wild Mouse is a clone of the Fly, and it's a bit jerky, but it's more thrilling than the Fly. This one also has a better theme, being on the boardwalk section of Knott's. 83. Apple's Apple. This one is beautiful to watch, and it's smoother than the previous two Wild Mouse coasters. 82. Gemini. This arrow is overrated in my opinion. It's large, but it's so rough and boring that it causes a horrible experience. Also, it's a mechanical nightmare, and you'd be lucky if both sides are running. 81. Corkscrew at Michigan's Adventure. This small arrow only has 2 corkscrews as elements. It's not rough, just a bit too small to enjoy. 80. Corkscrew at Cedar Point. Similar to the previous one, but this one has a better layout. While this one can be jerky, the loop is intense and the airtime hill is surprisingly forceful. 79. Corkscrew at Valley Fair. This is the best of the 3, as it's the largest, has 4 inversions, and it's over water. This corkscrew just looks better, and its larger size makes it the best. 78. Iron Dragon. This suspended coaster is a small one at that. It's a bit jerky, but overall it's a pleasant experience riding through the woods. It's not intense, and it's definitely a starter coaster. 77. Carolina Goldrusher. This is one of the better mine trains. It's pretty long and has a great setting, and the tunnel at the end is quite a rush. It's also very smooth, just a bit too small. 76. Spinning Dragons. This Gerslau is fun for the whole family. It doesn't spin as much as the Pandemonium clones at Six Flags, but it's still a fun and smooth experience. 75. Jaguar. This is the definition of a family coaster. It's slow but a fun experience, and the interaction with the other attractions is extraordinary. It goes into a loop, underneath other elements, and is always above a path. 74. Pony Express. Located at Knott's is this family moto coaster. It's fun being in that position doing launches and turns, but it's so slow and short that it leaves riders underwhelmed. 73. Wonder Mountain's Guardian. This almost isn't a coaster, but it does have a track and it's on RCDB, so here it is. This ride is small and it's mainly a dark ride, but it has a drop track and it's very interactive. 72. Dragonfire. This aero looper is in Canada and it's a fun experience. It's not too rough and its elements are pretty intense and fun. Its pacing needs a little work, especially in the second half. 71. Wildebeest. This Canadian Woody is one of the rougher ones, but it has a twisty layout and some good forces. The laterals on these turns are pretty nice, but it would be better if it didn't have to give a headache to everyone who rides. 70. Mighty Canadian Minebuster. Located in the same park as the previous, this one is smoother and has a better layout. Minebuster focuses more on negatives, but it could provide a little more and a bit of a smoother experience. 69. Grizzly at California's Great America. Grizzly has the same layout as Wildebeest, but it's a lot smoother of an experience. Unfortunately, that smoothness replaced all of the forces, so now it just meanders around. 68. Adventure Express. This Kings Island mine train uses the terrain to its advantage, and is overall full of lateral Gs. It's a bit rough and the ending is very disappointing, so it places a bit low. 67. Vortex Carowinds. This stand-up coaster is very underrated, but it is still a stand-up. It's a bit jerky and it can cause some pain with its positive Gs, but it has some good whip with it, and without the pain, it's rather fun. 66. Excalibur. This aero mine train isn't like the typical mine train. Instead, it's pretty tall and each turn provides some good laterals and whip. But because it's an aero, it's very bumpy, but its elements somewhat make up for it. 65. High Roller. This PTC is a very small and somewhat rough, but what it does have is pretty good. It maintains that classic wooden experience and provides some decent airtime for being the oldest coaster in the park. 64. Demon. This aero is almost identical to Dragonfire, but overall is a better experience. It's much smoother and has some decent theming with its rock work. 63. Thunderhawk at Dorney Park. This Woody from the 1920s is very underrated. It's not too rough, and while the ending is very bland with its trims, the first half provides some decent air and laterals. 62. Avalanche. This bobsled is often considered one of the better ones. It's a fun experience that may cause a bit of pain, but overall it has some good Gs and it's very enjoyable. 61. Wolverine Wildcat. This Din Woody may be the very rough or slightly rough. It has mixed opinions. It has a great layout with many turns and airtime hills, and it also has a tunnel at the beginning. 60. Boomerang. It's a typical boomerang, this one being the worst of the chain. It has the bulkiest restraints out of the bunch, and it's the roughest experience. 59. The Bat at Canada's Wonderland. The second Boomerang isn't as bad as the Worlds of Fun one, but it is still pretty rough. It's often regarded as being better than most, but it still is a boomerang and it can only be placed so high. 58. Backlot Stunt Coaster. This family coaster is surprisingly enjoyable. Located at 3 different parks, it provides a fun experience with some airtime and a fun launch. It also has a great tunnel and a theme. 57. Sierra Sidewinder. This spinning coaster has a very unique layout and is surprisingly intense for being so small. It's a family coaster with a punch that will cause a lot of fun. 56. Possessed. Possessed places at the halfway point on the list. This intimate impulse is rather intense and also has a holding brake at the top of the spike to halt riders in the air. This is one of the better impulses, but not as good as 55. Steel Venom. Steel Venom is a bit smoother, which is why it places higher than Possessed. 54. Wicked Twister. This impulse is the best of the 3, as it has the twisted backward spike instead of a vertical spike. Also, it's the biggest and most intense of the 3 impulses, and it's also the whippiest. 53. Thunderhawk at Michigan's Adventure. Unlike most SLCs, this one is actually not too rough. It doesn't have any headbanging, so riders can enjoy the very whippy and intense layout it has to offer. 52. Flying Cobras. The best boomerang in the chain is at Carowinds, and it's because of the restraints. These vest restraints eliminate all headbanging, so passengers can enjoy the intense layout. 51. Grizzly at King's Dominion. Unlike Grizzly in California, this one has some force to go along with it. It's not the smoothest coaster ever, but it's also not the roughest. It has a strong layout with a couple of tunnels as well. 50. Blue Streak. The oldest Cedar Point coaster places at 50. It's not too rough, and it has some great airtime to go along with the classic wooden coaster rumble. 49. Invertigo. This inverted boomerang is at Kings Island, and it might be the smoothest Vekoma in the States. It provides a ton of whip and intensity, all with a relatively smooth experience. It does have a few rough patches, but nothing major. 48. Timberwolf. This classic wooden coaster at Worlds of Fun recently added a brand new section with its 45-degree bend. Timberwolf is a bit rough, but it's a fast-paced experience that is full of airtime. 47. The Bat at Kings Island. This suspended coaster is one of the best. It's placed in a secluded forest near a ravine, and each element is fast and whippy. It's a bit too short, but it does have a lot of positives. 46. Magnum XL 200. The first ever hyper is at Cedar Point, and it places at 46. Magnum is a fun ride, but it's just so painful. The airtime is very strong, especially at the end, but the jerkiness and thigh pain you get on this ride knocks it down a lot. 45. Nighthawk. This Vekoma flyer is a lot smoother than people say. It's placed over a lake, and it's creepy to be looking down at the water below. It has a rattle, which is bad in the flying position, but it's smoother than people say. Nighthawk is very fun. 44. Vortex at Canada's Wonderland. This ride is very similar to the Bat, but it's placed on the mountain, then drops down to the river while wrapping around other coasters. It has a great setting, and its fast-paced experience places it here. 43. Montezuma's Revenge. This is one of the few shuttle loop coasters in operation, and it's a very great ride. Its launches are intense, as well as the loop. It's a fast-paced experience that only the most seasoned enthusiasts can handle. 42. Racer at Kings Island. This coaster is often looked down upon in the industry, and for no good reason. Racer is one of the smoother woodies, and it has some great airtime. It's also a dueling coaster, which is always a plus. 41. Racer 75. This dueling woodie is the same as the previous, as smooth and full of air. The only difference is that this one stays together at the turnaround, so it's more of a competition with the other train. Racer and Racer 75 are interchangeable. 40. Patriot at California's Great America. This floorless is definitely the smallest, but it's still a good ride. It's a very smooth experience with all of its graceful overbanks, and it has some good whip near the end. 39. Rougarou. This floorless is definitely a rougher one. It's not unbearable, but it's not as smooth as Patriot. In contrast to Patriot, Rougarou is massive and has a great layout. Rougarou is whippy and has some good Gs, especially in the first half. 38. Wild Thing. The first Morgan on the list is at Valley Fair. This hypercoaster isn't the best, but it isn't the worst either. Wild Thing has some good airtime, and it's one of the longest coasters in the chain. It's very smooth as well, and it's a massive coaster. 37. Silver Bullet. Definitely the most unique inverted coaster. It has a shallow drop and okay elements, but the other elements are intense and whippy. All of the elements are fun to ride through, and it's one of the smoothest inverts. 36. Hydra. This floorless coaster is a weird one with that. It has some good elements, like the Cobra roll, even if they are taken at a slower speed. What knocks this ride down is that it's very rough in the front, but not as bad as Rougarou. 35. Patriot at Worlds of Fun. This invert is not like normal inverts. Instead of being focused on intensity, this one is more graceful and drawn out. Even with that downside, this invert is speedy and massive, and it's just a fun experience. 34. Steel Force. This Morgan Hyper at Dorney is similar to Wild Thing. The difference is that this one is smoother and it has better airtime. Instead of certain hills having good airtime, every hill here has good floater. The airtime sadly isn't too strong and it feels a bit of a slow experience. 33, Valraven. This dive coaster isn't the best one. Its drop is fabulous over the midway and the ending has some good hang time. Unfortunately, everything else is just okay at best and the mid-course really kills the ride. 32, Gatekeeper. Another Cedar Point B&M places next and is a bit better than the previous. Gatekeeper has better elements overall with its great first drop and fun inversions. It also has a great head chopper near the end. 31, Mamba. Out of all the Morgan Hypers in the chain, this one is the best. Mamba has by far the best airtime and is the most fast-paced experience. Unlike the other two, Mamba's helix is very low to the ground and is overall a better ride. 30, Yukon Striker. This dive coaster is one of the best. The restraints are still a bit bad, but its drop is massive and all of the inversions provide some great hang time. It also has an underwater tunnel to back it up as the number 30 coaster. 29, Shivering Timbers. This massive wooden coaster is not talked about enough. It isn't too rough, and each massive floater hill provides some of the best airtime. This coaster is also one of the longest in the chain. 28, Flight Deck at California's Great America. This B&M invert is one of the most intense inverts ever. While it is a very short experience, it's one of the smoothest inverts. It also has a very low-to-the-ground helix that provides the G's, and it's very whippy. 27, Afterburn. While this ride is very whippy and has better elements than Flight Deck, it is a bit rough in my opinion. Because of the whippiness of Afterburn, it can cause a lot of headbanging, but it is one of the most intense B&Ms in the chain. 26, Talon. This B&M invert surprised me a lot. While it isn't the longest, it's definitely the smoothest one I've ridden. Some of the elements and turns, especially near the end, provide great positives and whippy transitions. 25, The Beast. While this wooden coaster isn't too intense, it makes up for it in other categories. This is one of the longest coasters in the world, and it has some tunnels and a fabulous finale. At night, it is impossible to see anything, and it feels like an indoor coaster. 24, Dominator. This floorless coaster is one of the best in the world. Dominator is very tall and fast, and it has great pacing. Also, Dominator has many whippy elements while providing a smooth and intense experience. 23, Copperhead Strike. This mock ride launch coaster is one of the better ones. The ride mainly focuses on hang time. Each inversion is slow, which causes riders to be hanging for a very long time. While the launches aren't intense, the whippy transitions and great airtime make up for it. 22, Hang Time. The main focus of this ride is obviously hang time. It has a great drop and it's beyond 90 degrees and it holds guests at the top. It also has wonderful hang time full inversions and it has a little bit of airtime. 21, Banshee. This B&M invert has vest restraints, which eliminates headbanging, but it doesn't eliminate the rattle that Banshee unfortunately has. But Banshee is very fast and intense, and its inversions make up for the rattle. 20, Raptor. Another B&M invert, this time at Cedar Point. It's by far the most intense of the bunch, and it's one of the smoothest. Additionally, the second half has some very whippy moments to prove that it's the best of the bunch. 19, Prowler. This GCI Woody is a great one. It's not the smoothest, but it has a great layout. It dives around trees, through the woods, and has some great ejector pops. It's also pretty whippy near the end. 18, Intimidator. This B&M Hyper is one of the best in the chain. It's not the longest, but it has some wonderful floater air with one of the smoothest coaster experiences. Unfortunately, it has some trims, but the airtime makes up for it. 17, Accelerator. This Intamin launch coaster might not be the longest, but it has one of the best launches. This is one of the fastest accelerations in America, and it also has some wonderful airtime on that top hat. 16, Ghost Rider. Another Knott's coaster places at 16, and this time it's a GCI makeover. This Woody is tall and fast and focuses on laterals. Ghost Rider has some of the best laterals in the chain, and it has some great airtime as well. Ghost Rider is overall a very intense ride. 15, Behemoth. This Canadian Hyper is very tall and fast. It has more airtime and length than Intimidator, and the second half of the ride is much better. Behemoth has a bit of whip in the second half with its forceful helix. 14, Orion. The newest coaster in the chain is Orion at Kings Island. This Giga, if you call it that, is focused on speed. It doesn't have the most intense experience, but it has some great airtime, and it's a very speedy coaster. 13, Leviathan. This coaster is Orion's older sister. Leviathan is about the same length as Orion, but it has more airtime. It has more floater moments, and it also has a tunnel. Overall, Leviathan just has a better layout, but they are interchangeable. 12, Diamondback. This Hyper shocked me the last time I rode it. While it has a rattle, it's not too strong. It also has some of the best airtime of any coaster, and each moment lasts forever. It's not too intense, but the airtime more than makes up for it. 11. Gold Striker. This GCI is not the smoothest. Even with its bumpy experience, it has a great layout. Its twisting and closed drop is a great start, and it speeds through its airtime-filled layout. Each overbank causes some great Gs, and it's overall a great ride. 10. Renegade. Very similar to Gold Striker, except it's a bit older. Renegade is Gold Striker with more to it. It's a bit smoother, and it has a lot more airtime and turns than Gold Striker. The ending is full of rapid transitions and airtime, but these two are interchangeable. 9. Mystic Timbers. The best GCI on the list is surprisingly the shortest. In this short experience, Mystic provides some great lateral Gs and flawless airtime. This is the most out-of-control wooden coaster experience in the chain. 8. Maverick. This Cedar Point Intimate is a very unique one with that. It's not tall at all, but it has some of the whippiest elements ever, especially in the first half. Its secret launch in the second half is always a blast, and it's full of ejector airtime. 7. Railblazer. Even if this Raptor has bad restraints, you can't deny its layout is spectacular. While it isn't a long ride, it provides some of the whippiest and most intense elements in the world. It may have the strongest airtime moment in the States. 6. Millennium Force. The original Giga Coaster is at Cedar Point, and it places at number 6. Many claim it's forceless, but I disagree entirely. It's full of out-of-control floater airtime, and it's a very long experience. The overbanks also provide some fun laterals. 5. Twisted Timbers. This RMC is shockingly great considering they had basically nothing to work with. Twisted Timbers is focused on airtime, and it shows. It's full of floater airtime, and it has some of the whippiest hills ever. This ride has some great twisted airtime. 4. Top Thrill Dragster. By far the shortest coaster on the list. Its short length causes a massive punch. The launch here is almost too intense, and the top hat causes passengers to float for over 5 seconds while spiraling down a 400-foot tall drop. 3. Intimidator 305. This Giga is tall, fast, and definitely intense. Its first turn is famous for causing riders to black out because of the Gs, and it has even whippier moments than Maverick. Think of Intimidator 305 as the airtime of Millennium Force and the intensity of Maverick mixed together. 2. Fury 325, the final Giga on the list. While not as intense as Intimidator 305, it has some wonderful elements. First of all, this ride is actually one of the longest in the States, and it also has some of the best floater airtime in the world. Additionally, the overbanks calls for some great Gs, and it keeps its speed very well. Finally, number 1 is Steel Vengeance. This Cedar Point RMC is often considered the best coaster ever built. It has some intense moments, but that isn't its main focus. Its main focus is airtime, and it has the most of the entire world with over 27 seconds. It also has some of the whippiest elements you can experience with lap bars, and it's one of the longest coaster experiences ever. Wow, this video took a long time. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. Comment below what your favorite Cedar Fair coaster is, and have a great rest of your day.